Hi, John, and hi, Chris. I'm so excited to meet you guys. It's been, months of developing this campaign, and it's so incredible to finally be talking to people that are working on the other side of this issue. And, I have a million questions. And of course, you can't answer them all, but, just a little bit about me. I have worked in shark conservation, for 2 decades now. And the squalene issue came up, this year. And it just sort of blew up recently, on Sunday, the 27th, when the Daily Telegraph article came out, we had no idea how much it would explode. It just came onto the scene, and suddenly the whole world is talking about this. So it's catapulted us into kind of a global campaign. And we started this as a concern for sustainability. The future of shark conservation. How can we make sure that we change the trajectory of things? And that's when I became aware of Amyris and started to reach out. And so I'm here today to talk to you guys, to hear from you. How did you get into this field of work? How did you decide to make an alternative? And where's it going to go next? So please, John, maybe just start to tell me more about this.
Sure, Stefanie. And first and most importantly, thank you for being with us. And thank you for your passion. It is always, I'm always grateful to the heroes and the champions who actually take on causes like you have and are true to the mission and really go out of their way to ensure that awareness and transparency is at the heart of how we live our lives. So thank you for all that you do. Now, this has been a passion of mine for quite some time. I was born and raised in a small village in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and realized very quickly that first, the ecosystem around our oceans and maintaining that ecosystem and sustainability in general, and keeping nature, or as I like to say it, leaving the world behind, hopefully better than when we entered it, is something that I'm very passionate about. And the issue with the sharks for me has been something that I've actually been working on for quite some time. Back in 2009, I ran across this gentleman, Shigeru, who was the CEO of a company in Japan called Nikko Chemical, who was a very respectable supplier to the cosmetics industry. They're a leader in technology, and they deliver ingredients to the cosmetics industry. And they've been working with shark squalene for skincare for a long time. As a matter of fact, I started calling him the grandfather of squalene because he had been involved in it for so long. And when I met him, he was actually in the process of contracting villagers in Portugal and in South Asia, actually in the Philippines, to go out and hunt sharks to extract the shark liver oil for squalene, and then obviously for squalene also. And I just felt, and I at the time told him, Shigeru, you're such a great guy. Why are you going out to set up villagers and invest in them to go hunt sharks? And he's like, well, being from Japan, we don't think there's anything wrong with killing sharks. But I'm like, this is for skincare. Like, you're actually killing a shark to extract the oil to make our skin better. This doesn't make any sense. Anyway, he at the time inspired me to really find a better solution. And he started asking me, okay, you don't want me to kill sharks. How else can I get great quality squalene? Because my customers want it. And then together with our chemists and our scientists, including Chris and his colleagues, we started to really work on a process to take sugarcane syrup and through fermentation, convert that sugarcane syrup to squalene. And we ended up developing a process to be able to do that. We actually today are the leading supplier in the world of squalene from sugarcane instead of sharks. We've significantly reduced the killing of sharks to make squalene. And we've been expanding the market. So not only have we replaced the need to kill sharks, we're actually making a better product, a more sustainable solution, and a product that's actually better for the skin because it doesn't have some of the impurities that shark liver oil does that actually block the pores that get in the way. So to me, that is a great path to what we're now doing with squalene as an adjuvant for vaccines, which is very much the same thing. We're taking a fermentation product, converting it to make squalene. And our mission is to do the same thing we did with squalane for skincare. We end up with a higher purity, high performance, quality, sustainable solution so that everyone in the world can have access to low cost vaccines that are highly high performing and are sustainably sourced. So again, this whole mission of not killing sharks to give access to great quality, whether it's adjuvants or whether it's an emollient for your skin, a real moisturizer for your skin. We don't believe sharks should be killed to do that. We believe it can be done sustainably, and we think fermentation is the route to a natural, sustainable source of both squalene and squalane. We've been doing it, starting with that idea, that Jim of an idea in 2009. We started supplying the market with squalane in 2014. And in the next month or so, we hope to be supplying the pharmaceutical industry with an amazing adjuvant that actually makes vaccines more powerful. And hopefully for the COVID vaccine, if they need an adjuvant, that we end up actually creating a vaccine that isn't as prone to developing resistance in the human body, and that can be sustainably sourced, so that all humans can say, I'm taking a vaccine, it didn't result in killing a shark, and I can be safe and secure in the future for pandemic. So I hope that gives you some sense of background as to what we've done and how we got here.
Well, I mean, I have a million follow-up questions. So I'm trying to sort this out in my head. What's the importance of it? I come at it purely from a shark conservation point of view. And, of course, in shark conservation, squalene, any shark oil product is not the biggest problem on this planet. We're dealing with overfishing and the shark fin trade, 70 million sharks a year. And I often get asked, why do you even bother with this vaccine and squalene issue? And to us, it is important because what people don't understand or might not, come to the conclusion that any product that contributes to the value of sharks, that it contributes to that number of 70 to 100 million sharks being taken. We're not just talking about the 3 million, let's say, that are estimated for cosmetics. We're talking about giving value to body parts, and as long as we see sharks only as a collection of parts that we should be harvesting, we're not seeing the big picture, why we need sharks, and they are incredibly important to us. Whether you like them or not, they're important to us. So it is all relevant, and I think the industries have tended to point to other industries saying, oh, it's their fault. No, they're taking more sharks. These guys are taking more sharks. And the squalene, cosmetics, and vaccine industry may seem like the smallest part, but it is relevant because it is something that we can actually change. This is not something that has to have a major fisheries regulation solution. It can actually be solved by people and companies like you, and by the willingness of the industry to make the switch, because, we took months to look into, are there alternatives? Can we even ask for this? We don't want to be unreasonable. We don't want to hold up the development of a COVID vaccine. We don't want to put sharks above human health. That's not what we're saying. So we waited until we knew, are there actually alternatives? And once we knew that, that's when we came out with a story. And that's what everybody is sort of attaching to. This doesn't make sense that we keep taking a wild population, a source from a wild population that we could grow completely transparently and under greatest quality control. It just, from every angle, it doesn't make sense. But before we go into anything further, all of these questions in my head, I wanted to hear from Chris. Can you, explain to me again, why is squalene used, shark squalene used in adjuvants? What's the benefit of using an adjuvant, and why particularly sharks?
Yeah, hi Stephanie. So yeah, there are many benefits. So there have been tremendous advances in immunology in the last 20 years. And that has meant big developments in both fundamental immunology and in vaccine development. So amongst one of the leading contenders, or possibly the leading contender as an adjuvant, is squalene, which, as we just discussed, comes from sharks. So what adjuvants do is essentially rev up the immune response to the protein or the bug that you're trying to inoculate against. So this was, adjuvants in general terms have been known for over 50 years, but squalene became known as a good adjuvant maybe 20 years ago, and it's been given to about 200 million people, 100 million doses plus, all of this so far from sharks. And the reason people do it is, as I said, it revs up the immune response. But, specifically, it means that you can, for example, you could use less of the bug or the protein immunogen, because what vaccines are is basically a protein that you develop an immune response to, and that protects you when you see the actual pathogen, the actual nasty bug. So what you can do with squalene is either use less of the protein. The protein is valuable and often in short supply, or you put the same amount of protein in and you get a better response. Now, this is really important, for example, in seniors, in the elderly population, because as you get older, it happens with everyone, the immune response declines. And the only way to get a really good response is to add adjuvants. I mean, you can add more protein, but a consistent way is to add an adjuvant. And that does work better in the elderly population. And that's why flu vaccines for the over 65s actually contain squalene in many cases. Mm-hmm. And the final point is that you can what they call broaden the response. So as you probably know, you have to get a flu shot every year. Mm-hmm. And that's because the influenza virus changes. And it doesn't have to change much, and the vaccine doesn't work. And what squalene can do is actually broaden that response. So if the virus starts to change a bit, that without the adjuvant, you would lose the protection, but you can keep it with the adjuvant. And there have been a number of examples of this. So, revving up the immune response both gives you a better response, it broadens the response, and is particularly helpful in the elderly. So those are the main reasons it's used.
I'd like to add a point, Stefanie, to Chris's comments, really building on your theme. I love your theme of it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to kill the sharks. It doesn't make sense to put a value on an animal component that actually isn't the right answer. And it doesn't make sense to only use a turbocharger for vaccines for the elderly and children because of the supply of this adjuvant being so limited and so difficult to get and so costly that pharmaceutical companies will only use it for where they must have it. I think what makes sense is taking what's good, making it available to all, not limiting to just a few, and doing it in a way that's sustainable. Because the reason it doesn't make sense to provide to all is because there's no way you could go hunt sharks to support the world's population for either a response to a pandemic or to serve everyone with a high-performing flu vaccine. So you end up limiting it. And I think the hard thing is to be in a situation where the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, is very well established, doesn't like change, doesn't like to have to change their approaches, to change their formulations, or to try something new. And so gets so fixated in a mindset that only what they've done works, rather than actually looking at a sustainable source of one of the world's best ingredients for an adjuvant, squalene, to make it available for all at an affordable and accessible cost without harm to sharks. And that for us is what makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I get sort of questioned on hey, do we really have a problem with shark populations? Is this really going to matter? And, when you're talking to the commercial fishing industry, they pretend that it's a limitless supply. There's plenty of sharks. Don't worry about it. The supply will not run out. But of course, you can't really stop there, because the problem is there's zero transparency in the shark oil industry. It's not just about the fact how many sharks do we have, is what kind of sharks are being caught. And, you know, around the world is made and how sharks are caught. I want to say that I highly doubt anyone can truly tell what species are in shark oil. So there are species that are being targeted for oil or fins, and then also for oil, that are highly endangered. And so while there were maybe plenty of certain types of sharks that people will point to, that's not what is being hunted. And that's really our concern, is like, if we're going to have a human health issue that demands, you know, an important contribution from sharks, well, then that will become a reason to put away all other concerns. And, you know, as humans, we have that track record. You know, when we want something, we'll justify taking it until that species is gone. And that's really where we're coming from. We don't really know the exact numbers, and we're not saying anyone is going out and killing sharks right now to get a vaccine, but we know where this track record is going. And as a follow-up question, what I'd really like to know is, you know, from a supply chain question, you know, because if you don't like sharks, you still would have to kind of agree with the logic that it would be much better to use something that you can grow and control. Is plant-derived, sugarcane-derived adjuvant, is it as cost-effective and stable? Is it as available? What's the scale? Can it be scaled to fill a demand?
Yeah, I mean, here's the way to think about it. For every billion vaccines, you need about 500,000 sharks. And you have to take the time to go hunt them. You have to extract, you have to purify, you have to process to get to squalene that you can then use in a vaccine. Right. And that takes time and is quite costly. The way to think about sugarcane-based squalene is for a billion vaccines, we actually use very little sugarcane. And more importantly, we could make enough squalene for a billion vaccines in about a month. And that squalene is pure, it's consistent, it's stable, and it can meet the specifications or exceed the specifications of any squalene that would come from a shark, and do it consistently every time. I think that's the benefit. It's fast. From a cost perspective, you could think about squalene from sugarcane as about 1/3 the cost of squalene from shark. So it's cheaper, it's faster, it's sustainable, it doesn't have the same impurities, and it's consistent every single time. It doesn't matter where or what shark it came from, because the process is consistent every time. To your point, I mean, we see it with consumers and many of our other consumer products. The consumer today is demanding more and more to know traceability. Where is the source? Where is the source? How was it made? Is it sustainable? And what's it going to do for me? I think we should demand the same thing from our pharmaceutical companies. We should understand, where are these things coming from? How are these ingredients getting into? And am I putting something into my body that I can trust is consistent every time and isn't doing damage to the planet? And I think that's the issue. To your point, it's not about the squalene from a shark. It's about the impact in the whole ecosystem and the uncertainty and the lack of predictability that we have in a process that we have no idea where it's being applied, where it's coming from, what kind of shark we're actually using.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem to make sense, you know, from it, however you look at it, however you turn it. And this is what I've been doing for months, trying to see the other side, you know, trying to understand, okay, are sharks somehow magical? All right, if that's the case, then that's what we have to do. Is it because of cost? Is it because of testing? What is holding up the industry from making the switch when it's also obvious? I don't get what the holdup is or what the hurdle is. What's your insight?
Look, I think, to be fair, and I think there's two sides of that story. To be fair, we did not focus on developing a sustainable squalene until really the last couple of years. And it takes a bit of time to develop it, to ensure the process is safe, and to be able to scale it. So, you know, part of the answer is there was not a good answer to start with.
Right.
Now there is, and we actually ended up accelerating because of the pandemic, because we believe to make any vaccine sustainable and accessible to all, it can't be dependent on going out and hunting for sharks. So I think that's part of the answer. It just wasn't available. It now is. And I can tell you the engagement from the pharmaceutical industry has been very strong. On the other side of the equation, my fear is they don't like change, right? And we know that because we've been dealing with large companies for a long time, and it always takes time to get them to adopt. And, they give you every reason you can imagine. It's not the same. It's not safe. Again, we've been through it for many different ingredients. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to fear of change. And as a result of fear of change or resistance to change, not taking the time to actually understand, to adapt their process and to use something more sustainable. At the end of the day, I think they all will want to do the right thing. And I'm hopeful, like I'm sure you are, that they'll choose to do the right thing. And I think the work that you're doing, hopefully, is raising awareness, driving transparency, driving the right conversation, and hopefully accelerating the transition to a more sustainable source of a great adjuvant that we hope can make vaccines better for all.
Let's hope so. I think everybody can do a certain part of this. Chris, do you think that biotech is the answer to a lot of these questions? Not just when it comes to squalene, but in general for future adjuvants and vaccines. Where do you see biotech to be the key to this?
Well, I work in the biotech industry, so I'd say yes, wouldn't I? but yes, I do. The squalene work that John's just been describing and that we've just been talking about, this comes out of over a decade of research at Amyris, working on what are called terpenes, the class of molecule to which squalene belongs. And several other of these adjuvants, they're actually terpenes. So, we have a good insight into a number of these molecules. And these come from, maybe not from sharks, but, they come from trees or whatever. And so you have to chop down all the trees, and none of this is good. All of these things you can develop from renewable sources, from sugarcane, by fermentation. So I see a really great future, the pairing of biotechnology, with the pharmaceutical and immunology, and giving great products, great pharmaceutical products that perform as well as the natural product, in some cases, possibly better.
Yeah.
That's
so
great.
I have to address the elephant in the room, which is the question I get asked every single time, is that are we going to hold up any COVID vaccine development by pushing for this? And also, how close are we to actually replacing? How easy or how difficult is it going to be to say, let's replace one or the other? Is this going to be years before it can be tested, before it can go through FDA? What's the process?
I think there's two answers to that question. If it's an existing vaccine, the squalene we're making is equivalent to the squalene that's being used currently. So if the vaccine is already approved, it should be a very quick process to switch out the shark-based squalene for sustainable plant-based squalene. I think for the COVID vaccine, it's really about where they are in the process, right? As long as they're still, around phase 1, phase 2 testing, they ought to be able to switch out the source of the squalene, validate that it's safe, and be able to use it in the final testing to ensure it's approved by whatever regulatory body they're actually going for approval. So I don't expect a delay. And I also think the reality is there are many vaccines currently in process that I would call vaccines for the rich people and to make us all feel good that there's a solution. That I think a lot of the vaccine work to get to a real sustainable solution for the world is probably going to take a little longer than any of us would like. And I think that's okay. I think it's good that we have a phase 1 and a phase 2.
Right.
Phase 1 kind of deals with the urgent, which is we need something immediately, because I think all of us really want to get to a more stable environment. Then we need something that's sustainable, that can be applied and used by all people in the world. And it can help not only for COVID-19, but respond to future pandemics. And I don't think there's any cause for delay, whether it's phase 2 or some of the phase 1, depending where they are in their testing. But like all COVID vaccines, They are going to have to get through testing, and the adjuvant is just one part of the vaccine that is going through the full test. So I don't expect it to be a delay, and I expect more than anything that by having a sustainable based adjuvant made from sugarcane, we ought to be able to scale whatever vaccine gets through testing much faster. So if anything, it should enable large scale production faster than actually having to go hunt sharks, kill them to be used in humans.
Right. Well, this is incredible information, and it gives me a lot of hope. And I really appreciate you guys talking to me about this. I know we could talk for hours, and we can continue this. And I hope that we continue these talks, that this is just the beginning, because it would be nice if all of us can work together to, you know, to move forward and be positive about this. None of this needs to be negative or gloom and doom. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
We encourage you to continue your fight any way we could help. Again, being a villager who was dependent on the ocean, I'm so committed to the ecosystem that we all need in this planet, and I appreciate all that you do. Thanks, Stefanie.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Chris.